was not impressive, as we had earlier indicated, due to voter apathy. Now we have another round of elections scheduled for this Saturday, the 11th of March. Will the story be any different? Will public expenditure on elections count for something, given the country's economic situation? That, of course, is what we're taking a look at in our conversation segment today, as we count the cost of voter turnout, high or low. I'm Kingsley Osadolo, and I thank you for being with us at Good Morning Nigeria today.
Hello, I'm Kirian Umaya, joining Kingsley to say welcome to our flagship show, coming to you live on the network service of NTA. As usual, we have other segments which will include a newspaper review, business, sports, and of course foreign tidbits. And all that will be coming as we make progress. For now, let's join Frama Pai, who has the morning's news highlights. Hello, Frama. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Kieran. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Kieran. Good morning, Nigerians. And here is the morning news. Buhari addresses confab on least developed countries. President Muhammadu Buhari says if no one is to be left behind in the quest to achieving the sustainable development goals, least developed countries must be given urgent and robust assistance towards unlocking their potential and building socio-economic resilience. This was while addressing the 5th United Nations Conference on Least Developed Countries in Doha, Qatar.
In need of transformative solutions. The theme of the event, From Potential to Prosperity, he believes is not only apt, but indeed a call to action in addressing their developmental vulnerabilities and challenges that are not always of their making.
As a matter of urgency, there are a number of priorities we have to focus on to help achieve sustainable development goals in these countries and ensure their prosperity. There is no doubt that the least developed countries need enormous financial support and investment of enormous resources to reduce poverty, create jobs, combat hunger, expand social protection systems, and ensure quality education.
Meanwhile, Iran is seeking to collaborate more effectively with Nigeria towards deepening and expanding relations in the oil and gas, agriculture, and other critical sectors for enhanced socio-economic well-being of the two countries and their people. This came to light when President Muhammadu Buhari granted audience to the Iranian Vice President Mohsen Mansouri on the margins of the UN Conference on the Least Developed Countries in Doha, Qatar.
Solicit for Nigeria's understanding and support towards maintaining channels of communication and cooperation to enable his country break out of the isolation it finds itself in.
You know, Nigeria is a non-aligned country. We have our independent foreign policy that is not, we're not dictated to by any other country. And I think Iran understands that and understands that as a big country, that is not dependent on any other country and not easily influenced by other countries, that Nigeria is a country that, you know, they can aspire to have closer relations with, especially trading relations, economic relations, and, you know, and also in other areas. They really want to expand these relations into all sectors.
Ahead of this Saturday's governorship and state houses of assembly elections, strategic commanders of police formations have been charged to provide the needed leadership to ensure a peaceful atmosphere for the electorate and those on election duty. Inspector General of Police Usman Alkali Baba gave the directive at a meeting with strategic commanders at the force headquarters, Abuja.
I charge you all to recommit yourselves to national duty and sustain the high operational level that is attracting a broad commendation to the force.
In the meantime, the Police Service Commission is demanding for improved performance from police officers on election duties during Saturday's governorship and State House of Assembly elections. In a statement, the Commission says it is also expecting reports from the leadership of the Nigerian Police Force on the proven cases of misconduct for Commission's consideration. The The commission enjoins police officers on election duties to restrict themselves to ensuring that voters are allowed to discharge their civic responsibility and that their votes are protected. Similarly, the Commission warns that the police personnel must not encourage the subversion of the people's will at the polling and collation centers and must not show any sign of partisanship. Meanwhile, the Commission says it is currently studying cases of police conduct arising from the February 25 presidential and National Assembly elections. The People's Democratic Party, PDP, and its 2023 presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, have submitted a letter of petition to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, demanding cancellation of the 25 February 2023 presidential election. The party laid the complaint during a peaceful protest to INEC headquarters, Abuja.
We call on INEC not only to cancel the election, but do the needful and conduct a very credible election. If there are remedial issues to be dealt with, we are going to deal with those remedial issues.
The Labour Party governorship candidate in Adamawa State, Umar Mustafa Madawaki, has stepped down for the APC governorship candidate, Senator Aishatu Dahiru Ahmed Binani. He said the decision was born out of desire to develop the state, and Binani remains the only candidate that will champion the cause. Usman Mukhtar has the report.
The governorship candidate of Labour Party in Adamawa State, Umar Mustafa, who collapsed the structure of his campaign organization in support of the APC governorship candidate in the state, Senator Aishatu Dahiru Ahmed Binani, said they share the same mission and vision towards harnessing the resources of the state for the developmental projects. He promised to mobilize support and ensure victory of Binani in the forthcoming governorship election, calling on his supporters to canvass votes for her.
As for this race, we are talking about this race. I am saying every single supporter of Otumba from the 21 local governments should now dedicate themselves to the service of Senator Aishatu Ahmed Dahiru Binani.
The APC governorship candidate in Adamawa State, Senator Aishatu Dahiru Ahmed Binani, who expressed appreciation for the show of support, promised to provide good governance and result-oriented programs and policies if given the mandate.
So I'm assuring you this is a welcome development and a great achievement to the APC family. I will say this is a very, very welcome idea. It has always been my desire for this, my brother from my uncle, to join me and support me in actualizing my ambition. And today is a dream come true.
In Yola, Usman Mukhtar, NTA News.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kingsley after this break. Do stay with us.
Well, all right, well, we have a little glitches there, but that is over now. We continue the program with the business news. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria says loan repayment under the Anchor Borrowers Program stands at 52.39%. Details with Alika Obarachi Aroa.
The Central Bank of Nigeria says it remains committed to its developmental mandate of stimulating access to finance for the real sector, disclosing that total repayments as of the end of February 2023 under the Anchor Borrowers Program stood at 0.503 trillion naira, representing 52.39%, adding that the balance of 0.119 trillion naira was not yet due for repayments. The acting director, Corporate Communications Department, Dr. Abdulmumin Issa, disclosed this in Abuja on the performance of the Anchor Borrowers Program, revealing that the bank had released the sum of 1.079 trillion naira as of February 28, 2023, of which 0.960 trillion naira was due for repayment. According to him, the central bank Anchor Borrowers program had supported about 4.57 million smallholders farmers at the end of February 2023, who cultivated over 6.02 million hectares of 21 commodities across the country. He listed the commodities as rice, wheat, cowpea, millet, maize, cotton, fish, soybean, poultry, cassava, groundnuts, ginger, sorghum, oil palm, cocoa, sesame, tomato, castor seed, yellow pepper, onions, as well as cattle. Now let's take a look at Monday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Opanachi, Arua.
All right, thank you very much, Alika, for the business package we had earlier before that break. Coming up next for us now is newspaper review. All right, newspaper review is next, and our newspaper reviewer, Chukwudi Okoli-Ogbuaja, is right here with us in the studios for this morning review session. Chukwudi, we're glad to have you this morning. We have quite a busy collection. Kirian, I think we'll take, let's take two apiece.
You have a table for
we have, I got a Punch and Blueprint, and Kirian has New Telegraph and The Nation. I also have the Leadership, but whichever we're able to take, then of course we take them. All right, Kirian.
All right, yes, let's start the review with a New Telegraph newspaper. Above the name flag, CBN, Nigeria's forex inflow drops by 27.10% to $64.14 billion. All right, and below the name flag, Senate presidency, Southeast tipped to lead 10th National Assembly. That's on page 2. Threatening non-indigenous call for anarchy, Bode George raises the alarm over threat to Ruth Vivo's life. It's on page 2. Senatorial polls, 7 female senators, ex-governors lose return bids. It's on page 9. Kaduna Goba, I won't step down for any party, says LP candidate, as 8 parties endorse PDP. It's on pages 5 and 30 of the New Telegraph. Now, the lead story of this newspaper, if you can see that on TV, INEC seeks court's permission to reconfigure beavers for Saturday's polls. INEC seeks court's permission to reconfigure beavers for Saturday's polls. You can find that story on pages 3, 4, and 5. It has readers. Presidential section is a charade. PDP Test Commission says hasty declaration of result violates Electoral Act as Atiku leads party protest to INEC office. PDP gesturing, Tinubu says to the exercise. Police arrest 203 electoral offenders, recover 18 firearms from political thugs. That's during the last election. Now, Buhari plays global financial structure for placing debt burdens on vulnerable countries. It's on pages 3 and 5. Now, political violence, the icon of democracy, according to B. Rahim, court to rule on killer corpse, no case submission, April 3. It's on page 31. All right. Below the photo story that I have here, relief as banks resume old 500 and 1,000 naira notes disbursement. 2023 census will gulp 869 billion naira, says federal government. All right, so it has spent about 291.5 billion so far. All right, Kinsley.
Okay, Kirian, we'll take a look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper. Leadership newspaper, above the nameplate, we take one of the two headlines. Soldier kills commander, two others, and self in Sokoto. That's a pretty sad one there from Sokoto. I'm sure the officials in that command will be quite worried about what happened. Now, below the nameplate, old Naira notes. Banks foot drag as CBN keeps mum. That's in contradistinction to the headline that Kieran just read. Protests don't destabilize Nigeria's democracy, ADNEC tells PDP. The details on page 7. The 10th National Assembly leadership. APC leaders move to douse tension over sharing formula. Seek audience with Tinubu. Lawan Bajabi Amila may be shut out as Sani Musa joins race. Public holiday forces lawmakers' inauguration date to June the 13th. Diphtheria death toll hits 61 in Kano. Details of that on page 15. Alleged homicide. Doguwa gets 500 million naira bail, barred from constituency. You have details on page 10. And then the photograph there on the front page shows the protesting leaders of the PDP at the INEC office yesterday. You see the presidential candidate, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, the party chairman, and Tambuwal, who is governor of Sokoto, all there in the truck that took them to the Maitama offices of INEC yesterday. And very quickly, Kieran, I want to take a look at the front page of the Punch, or you want to go back to The Nation?
Yeah. Okay, let's take The Nation. All right. The Nation newspaper. Above the name flag of The Nation newspaper. INEC to reconfigure BFRs to read that in the other headlines. On page 8, CBN tackles IMF's claim on Uncle Borrowers loans. 98 senators elect, 325 reps elect to get a call today. About it on pages 25 and page 5. Now below the name flag, Olani Beku 49 others to defend Tinubu's mandate. That's on page 5. APC, PDP clash over presidential poll results. Article leads protest. Wike dismisses action. INEC, allegiance is to Nigerians. All right, the lead story. Nigeria or Naira scarcity lingers despite Supreme Court judgment. Naira scarcity lingers despite Supreme Court judgment. No cash at banking hall. ATM points. Banks await CBN's directive on old notes. That's according to The Nation newspaper. In other ones, they said the old notes have returned. Okay,
are returning. We have conflicting headlines on the front pages of the papers. The Punch, for instance, has as its lead story, Supreme Court order on old notes. That's the kicker. Banks in partial compliance begin skeletal recirculation. With two riders, few banks pay old 500 naira, 1,000 naira on Monday. Others await directives as Emefiele keeps mum. Most ATMs remain dry, and skeptical bank customers and traders reject old notes from banks. That's what we got there. I read earlier the soldier who went berserk, killing a commander, two others, before taking his own life. 50 feared killed as suspected herdsmen invade Benue communities. 203 hoodlums arrested during presidential poll. That's according to the police. And of course, of that number, there were 185 incidents with a recovery of 18 arms. So 203 hoodlums arrested during the presidential poll. And then above the nameplate, let's take one other headline. It says, government seeks 327 billion naira donor funding for census. Details on page 18. Chukudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. I'm going to key in at the point where you talked about few banks paying old 500 naira, 1,000 naira on Monday. Then other banks are waiting, directives. And there's, as Emefiele keeps mum as part of that story. Most ATMs remain dry. That means they're not dispensing, of course. Now, the important thing is the indication that there is compliance with the Supreme Court order, which keeps all 200, 500, and 100 naira notes in circulation till December 31st, 2023. When disagreement looms or does indeed happen, the courts are the final arbiter. So if the Supreme Court has pronounced, the expectation is that we all comply. So I'm happy that there is indication that the Compliance has started. The message it sends is perhaps more important than the compliance itself. That's the point there. Now, there is an interesting one here, and that's to do with the election on February 25. INEC, according to the blueprint, is asking the appeals court to vary the orders granted the Labour Party and the PDP in terms of access to sensitive election materials. We should include the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS. INEC says the variation of the orders would enable it reconfigure the election gadget for the governorship and state houses of assembly elections. And I say, and here's why. I don't know, I am not savvy when it comes to computer or, software things. But the comes from, is it possible for us, like you handle your files on the computer, open another folder on the BVAS to handle the governorship and the state houses of assembly election without tampering with what went into the presidential and national assembly elections? That's the question I ask, because this is likely to start some kind of apprehension in people who would think that what happened in the presidential and national assembly elections could be tampered with. I think it's for technical people in IT to sort out, because it's very important that credibility is retained even in the process of trying to go to court and all that. That is what I think about that. There is a 203 election offenses related arrests, and I say I am happy about that. Just yesterday, I was telling Kingsley that as much as I don't know law, I am squeamish. I feel squeamish when somebody says, because I was talking about the 2019 elections, and I said, all those people who snatched ballot boxes, all those people who burnt up election materials, what did they do to them? I was physical about it almost. And somebody said, a judge does not grant that which has not been asked for. I hope this time around, this is going to be asked for. And I want to say, do the police need anyone to ask for the punishment of election, offense, people who perpetrate election offenses? I think it's something they can take over themselves once they have enough proof. I don't know whether I'm getting it right.
Well, I wouldn't know, but in the first one you raised, is what I'm interested in. That has to do with the reconfiguration of the BVAS machine. We're not technical, but why they are seeking a permission to do that, there must be a reason for that. We're seeking permission to do that because if you reconfigure, in my little understanding, you are changing the performance system. You are tampering with the performance.
Well, they say they want to ready it for the governorship.
Exactly. And if that happens, the possibility of tampering with the previous information stored in the system could be there. It could be.
We wouldn't be sure
because of the
IT.
In my understanding, reconfiguration. So I mean, it's not going to be what it used to be. It should just be reconfigured, perhaps to channel every aspect of that, every department of that BVAS machine, towards governorship and the House of Assembly election. So perhaps it will clean up whatever that is left of the previous election. That's what I think it is, and that's a necessity for seeking permission to do that.
It should have a memory and a storage capacity, I want to think.
But when you reconfigure, I wonder whether it will retain what it has before. That's where I'm looking at. That's why the parties are kicking against that. That's why they're kicking against that. Because if that happens, they will not have access to the BVAS until after the conduct of the election on the 11th. Okay. After which the BVAS will be returned. Are you going to reconfigure again to recapture the previous information stored there? That's what is not clear to me.
Well, the matter is sub judice, so I'm reluctant to get into the nitty-gritty of the law of evidence on this. But just to state that the critical thing is you're looking here for evidence and what might be lost if the BVAS machines were to be reconfigured. And what is embedded in the BVAS right now, that expert testimony can extract and archive it with the Election Petition Tribunal, which is the Court of Appeal.
Between now and Saturday?
Well, it has to be between now and Thursday, because you will need some days to reconfigure. What is the value of the evidence that is embedded in the BVAS machine? And so you extract it, and then you deposit it with the trial court, if there is a repository for that.
Exactly, that's what I was.
And then when you have used the BVAS for the government, as I said, the matter is subject, so I don't want to get into details. So I apologize to your lordships. When then you have conducted the governorship election, you return. And then, of course, put back into the BVAS machines the evidence you had earlier extracted from it. The thing is to have that evidence in escrow.
Intact.
In escrow, so that at any material time you can call on it in the course of the trial. And I think that's the crux of the matter.
Exactly.
And if they're not able to resolve that, if the lordships decline to give the approval, then it means that the elections will have to be postponed. That will be the consequence, of course, of challenging the outcome of an election. It is not the fault of the petitioner, not the fault of the respondents, amongst whom, of course, will be INEC, not the fault of the petition hearing body, in this case, the Election Tribunal, where the Court of Appeal serves as court of first instance.
You mentioned could be postponed, because the BVAS itself is a law, isn't it? So that's a very important point you just raised.
It is, it's funded on law, but it is the usage. It is the usage on the timing. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Yes, there is a supervening need.
Yes.
To extract something from extract it from the BVAS. So you would need the experts to talk about this.
I see the way you pause, because the matter is under judge. It's sub judice. Yeah, Kiran.
Yes. Which other one you?
No, there's one issue.
This Naira.
Kiran, before we get to the Naira issue, I want to raise this, because Naira issue is a running story. I promised to talk about the Supreme Court decision, but I want to raise this very quickly. Census. The last population census that we had, the housing and population census, was in 2006. Before 2006, the last one we had was in 1991, during the Babangida era. And before that, there was a 1973 census conducted by the former Chief Justice Adetokunbo Ademola. So it was contentious. That was under Gawan. Now, the report, Kirian, you remember you read it from one of the papers, to say this is how much we need for the census exercise, but this is how much we have. There are varying percentages I've read. Some say they have 46% in the Kitty, another account says they have about 62% in the Akiti. The census was supposed originally to take place this month, March 2023. Now they said, okay, there are suggestions that will push it to May 2023. I want to suggest, and very strongly too, that look, the nation's mood, will it conduce to the conduct of a census exercise at this time?
Big point.
Sometimes we have to be realistic. Point. And by May, the rains would have started in some parts of the country, which could disrupt. 73, I remember that census exercise. It was only the dry season. In 1991, it was in November. 2006, it was in November. What stops us? First of all, we don't have the full complement of the funds, so we don't go in there and say conduct a shoddy exercise, and you start complaining, oh, inadequacy of funds was what affected our conduct of the census, full population exercise, and so on and so forth. Get the money into your kitty, and then be sure that the country's mood will be out of, some persons will say, the national trauma that we are into. We're just talking now about governorship election and what might happen and so on and so forth, and people are going to worry about that, and after that there might be litigation issues, and then you are worried, then the next thing is handing over, you're having transition, so that's when you are going to tell people, oh, move to your location, stay wherever you are. I don't know. Gentlemen.
This census has been planned. In fact, it's over 10 years plan. And this election that we're having now has been fixed since last year. And there would have been no need for that to be a clash between this election and the census.
The census could have happened.
Census is a serious business. You are counting the persons. You want to know the population of the country, which is a factor when it comes to budgeting, allocating resources to different sectors of our national life. Census is key to development. So it's not something you can come and tie within a period of time when perhaps the nation is in certain difficulty, or or economically, or the other, or in an election situation. And again, weather, as Kingsley pointed out. So these are things we shouldn't be talking about in the first place, because when you're planning, you plan with greater details, so that you'll be sure that what you're doing is going to be adequately implemented. That has been the issue that we have in this country. We articulate, we plan, we have blueprints, but when it comes to implementation of these policies, we begin to lack. Finance will be the major thing to talk about, followed by inadequacies in terms of implementation. Like we're talking about operations. Now we've just had an election, and you know how people function. All the officers did not do what they were supposed to do. Right. If they did, because already INEC is complaining about the activities of some of the officers they posted. And so
on a jocular note, I know you're taking us to the end now. Actually, one of the things Kingsley said is that the rains are about to set.
Exactly.
And that reminded me that I need to send money to Mama Doya, as I prepare to start farming somewhere.
well, I think the NPC itself, that's the Population Commission, had announced that there was very low enthusiasm amongst the citizens when they conducted the mock exercise that they did some months ago.
Yes.
So that they don't tell you the apathy and so on and so forth. So what is worth doing well, Kirian, is what you need to put in your energy. We wanted to talk about the Naira recirculation.
Well, we don't seem to have more time, left. But just for a mention, the issue of having a 25% of votes cast in the capital city of Abuja for one to be declared the president or something. And I read what a former Attorney General of the Federation wrote on that, saying that in 2008 there was a decision, a judgment by the Supreme Court of Nigeria on that, and what have you. So I didn't quite get reactions from different quarters to understand whether what Nduaka has said they did conform with the information he put out with respect to that.
It's okay, but Nduaka will remain a great authority in law, jurisprudence, or whatever you want to call it. But one thing that makes me pull back a bit when we come to these legal things is when you see two legal luminaries arguing in opposite directions. So that's when the likes of Chukwudi beat a hasty retreat. Yes.
Okay. All right.
So what is the conclusion? You just put the matter on the table like our fruits. Who they fight our fruits platter? Who they fight trouble?
Another day. We are going to take on that. All right. We conclude this segment. We thank you for watching, and we thank Chukwudi as well for being here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We hope to see you again tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
All right. The program is Good Morning Nigeria on NTA Network Service. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we will be dealing with our topic for today. Stay with us. Well, you are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on NTA Network Service. And here is Oyemi Ajayi with a background report as a prompt for our conversation this morning.
No doubt, since 1999, Nigeria has enjoyed uninterrupted democratic dispensation. This also reflects the civic responsibility of the citizens in electing their preferred candidates. The voter turnout for some time has been recording an undulating figure, but analysts have revealed that the recent 2023 presidential election recorded the lowest turnout of voters ever. Down memory lane, the turnout in 1999 was 52.3%. This officially grew to 69% in 2003, but fell first to 57.5% in 2007, then to 53.7% in 2011, before dropping to 43.7% in 2015. For the 2019 general polls, which had a budget of 189.2 billion naira, 28.61 million Nigerians participated in the election out of the 80 million voters. The decision of the 52 million voters to stay at home came at the cost of 124 billion naira to the country. Experts believe that a cost-benefit analysis of public expenditure on elections is an essential component of the electoral reform agenda. This is the highly recommended given the country's economic recession due to bad economic choices, disruptions in public finance and negative externalities. Experts have given reasons for low turnout of voters to include the voter apathy, the poor economic situation alongside INEC's late deployment of officials and materials to polling units. But the major challenge many observe is the voter apathy. The February 25, 2023 general elections were believed to be quite anticipated, with youths showing readiness and awareness to cast their ballots to bring the change they so much desired. The electoral umpire had announced that over 80 million voter cards were collected, but the voter turnout is said to be the lowest since Nigeria's independence. In 36 states, less than half of the eligible population turned out to vote, and no state had a turnout above 40%. Many have questioned why the low turnout of voters, despite measures put in place by INEC to ensure full participation by eligible voters, even with the extension of PVC collection. What more could be the reason for low turnout of voters, despite the level of awareness and willingness to vote, especially by the youths? Guest already seated in the studio will be answering this question shortly.
Thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that elaborate backgrounder. We have with us in the studios a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria is Ezenwa Nwangu. Ezenwa Nwangu, of course, is Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Ezenwa, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, thank you.
Okay, Kieran?
Yes, and from Benin, we have Tony Abolo. Tony Abolo is a veteran broadcaster, sociologist, and a media consultant. Thank you, Tony Abolo, for joining us this morning.
Thank you very, very much. I'm glad to be here.
All right, let's let charity begin at home. And so we're taking first Ezenwa Nwangu. Ezenwa Nwangu, we're looking at the numbers this morning. And in the end, what we want to also try to interrogate is value for money. The background report by our correspondent already gave some highlights. And earlier, while we were introducing to this program, my colleague and I did talk about the number of registered voters, over 93 million. PVCs collected, over 87 million, had a shortfall of about 6 million. But voters who came out on the 25th of February, 25 million. And therefore, you have a shortfall for those who had their PVCs, a shortfall of well over 60 million. 60 million. And many would argue that INEC, of course, had also prepared for those 60 million voters who were expected to turn up but failed to turn up. How do we begin to understand all these numbers and what, of course, it means to the public treasury?
Well, thank you. I think that we had a conversation here sometime, and I was making effort to ask that we moderate expectations. There was so much, razzmatazz around what was going on around the PVC collection and the challenges and all of that. And I remember some other place. I did say we for instance, go into a exaggerated opinion on the crisis, the challenge, and all that raises expectations in a way that does not reflect the fact that election is not compulsory in our country. Voting, voting is not compulsory. It is a voluntary, patriotic.
With the NTA News mobile app, the one-stop information center, real news at your fingertip. Be the first to report by uploading first-hand information on the You Report link, and be the first to know by simply clicking on any of the links on the sidebar for headlines, domestic and foreign news, economy, security, politics, sports, and more. Stream live on your smartphone and tablets and stay connected. It's pretty.
It's a mobilization. The development associations, everybody get out there and say, look, you must register, because at the end of the day, you know, when they are bringing, when amenities are being given to our communities, it has to do with our voting strength. That's number one. So people go there. There are many who also, because those things, we have multiple ID cards, you know, your passports, your voter's cards, your driver's license. Most of these other two are very cumbersome and expensive. This one is free, and it solves the same problem of ID card. So many people simply go to get the voter's card to be able to use it as ID card. There is the bigger challenge also about, you know, whether democracy itself works for the majority of the citizens. That question is internal. It's something people are dealing with. This thing, is it truly, does it work for us? And it's not a Nigerian question. It's a question that democracy is grappling with across the world. So when we then, in 2019, we had 84 million people in our voter register. The percentage of voting in 2019 did not show. When we added up to 93 million now, 93 million people into the voter register, and people were saying, no, this time is going to be different. I kept saying, no, those underlying conditions have not changed. The fact that the way people perceive an election, the way people continue to perceive this democracy, until we begin to make it work for the greater percentage of our people, no matter what preaching we do, it will not appreciate.
Yes, thank you indeed for your initial comments. Let's go to Benin, where we have Tony Ebolo. Tony, you've just listened to Mwago. 180 billion naira, over 180 billion was spent during the 2019 elections, and this time around we have a staggering 305 billion naira in the build-up to the elections for preparations by the national umpire. And we are trying to look at the extent of planning that the INEC engaged in, the structure that they put together, you know, to ensure that they're able to carry out the process, which we are still going through now. And we're also looking at voters to say, look, is it commensurate, you know, with what the public pulse has released to the INEC with respect to the elections and all that took place?
Sincerely, I cannot but largely agree with Mr. Nwagu for his submission. And I think his last point is something we should underline when he says, looking back in 2019 and looking back at 2023, we cannot but look at the fact, like he said, the underlying conditions. Because for me, what seems to be happening perennially is that all there is as a signifier of our democracy is just elections, period. Elections, after that, elections. After that, elections. And people are beginning to ask, what does elections mean to us? It's like people, like he said, globally, people are also asking, what does democracy deliver? And people are asking questions. Is it all there is to it about elections? And until we improve good governance,
you're not going to get the bounce that people are expecting. And it is that creates the enthusiasm. Forget about, the splurge we had middle of the year when people rushed for their PVC cards, and we were hoping that was going to translate into that. But the figures that have come out and the tally that we're getting from INEC, 8 million to the president-elect, about 6 million to Atiku, 6.9. Then you have about 6.1 going to Atiku. Are going to be looking at the three frontliners. Then you add it all up, and you look at the number that was registered, claimed to have been registered, and the number that collected and were said to have been accredited. And everything doesn't just add up. Then you ask yourself, what does this democracy really, really mean? So until we improve on good governance, we're not likely to get the commensurate return for the humongous amount of money that is being expended. So, okay, if you want to look at, why, well, so many other reasons. Is it it's difficult to say apathy. I thought there was enthusiasm. I listened, reading the papers, listening to radio, TV. Then you said, it's not going to be an apathetic election. But the figures seem to indicate. But could it be because of the intimidations, the fact that there was ballot snatching, ballot box snatching? Could those be the reasons why we were having this kind of figure that have now appeared before us? So it is not quite encouraging that we spend so much money every 4 years, especially at the national level, to get the kind of outcome that we're getting in terms of numbers. So that is where we get very, very concerned that something has to be done. Do we improve on technology? I think that's going to be important going forward. Some are suggesting, why don't we use apps? Anybody can use the app. And I know the immediate argument could be, there are people in the villages who can't touch their phones, and so they may not be able to know what to do. Then let's go back in history. Remember, there was a time age was an issue in terms of universal suffrage. Then not only that, there was a time women were not allowed to vote. So let that be the issue. And maybe let's look at what is beneficial to us. And I think we should begin to improve on the technology, because this time, I think technology may have fooled us. We believed that technology was going to deliver. And if we had this BVAS technology, the IREV, then all that, the grammar that we get from INEC, that, this time it will deliver. But it didn't seem to have given us the results.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Tony Abolo, for your initial comments. But I still want to stay with you. And again, before we crunch the larger figures arising from the conduct of the elections and whether the public spend on this was worth it, can we also look at the back end? Who got registered as a potential voter in Nigeria? Because I don't want to ascribe a great deal of credibility to it, but there were some accounts in the social media indicating that on the eve of the presidential election, some foreigners who tried to get into the country were arrested, and then they were found to have in their possession PVCs, when of course they were not Nigerians, and that those PVCs were then seized from them. Now, it means that these persons had earlier registered to be counted among potential Nigerian voters. So how do we get a filtration process so that non-citizens, because that's the critical qualification for you to vote and be voted for in the country. It is not just a residency qualification. It's the fact that you are a citizen that you can vote. Now, we have all these numbers. We are told 93.4 million persons were registered. Were all these Nigerian citizens in the first instance? And assuming they were not, what could we begin to do so that at the end we can have a more realistic appreciation of the numbers we're looking at?
Kingsley, I think it's a bit difficult to answer that question. Reason is, they are typical Nigerian questions. We must go back to the basics, and that is values. And the values should be driven by integrity. And this is where Nigerians fall short of when you measure conduct and character by integrity. So, who is supposed to do the background check? Who is supposed to ascertain who are the Nigerians who got the PVCs? I know there were a few things bandied, whether they were social media reports, then, in fact, even halfway through, again, maybe social media would say, I'm not too sure it was INEC that did say it, but there was a time I read that INEC said there were so many underage voters that were registered in Kano. Now, well, if we take that as perhaps some reason, then you begin to ask yourself, where do we really lie? So I think we should be going back to the issue of how do we restore integrity in the system? Who are those who manage the systems? If they are trustworthy, then I'd like to believe that in terms of filtration, to use your language, in terms of filtration, that will percolate and will now look down that, oh, those who are registered are duly Nigerians. But by and large, 93 million, that's, I mean, it's to be expected, given a demographic spread. Then you now look at the fact that if we say we're 200 million, 93 million is not even encouraging. We just expect that instead of 93 million registered, we should be looking at 100 and something, 190 something. Then you now know we are bringing a lot of people into the voting pool. But we're not seeming to get that, because 2019, if you go back still, that's the kind of figures that we still seem to be getting. So it's a bit troubling. So I don't know how we can resolve that. And that's why, you know, just if I might throw it like an aside, people are saying, and indeed we are saying, that instead of all this business of national conference on political power sharing and whatever it is we want to do with national conferences, it is time we began to look at a national conference of values. That's what sociologists are saying. We should sit back and look at, because you see, there is this troubling fact of Nigeria. It started with our colonial experience, and then we moved on, and we amalgamated the country. Okay, we've amalgamated, but have we amalgamated values that you can call national values? I don't think so. It is time we sat down as a people to say to ourselves, if we had national values driving the core behavior of the political class, the core behavior of those in governance, the core behavior of every one of us in Nigeria, then we might have something to say. So it is when that begins to operate, then you can now hope that we will now have a figure that is trustworthy. And when you say 93 million, by and large, you discount here and there. You now say, oh, maybe 91, 90 million are Nigerians. In terms of spread that you were trying to ask, from the figures, the higher percentage went to the youth. And those who are 70 plus were said to be about 5 million in terms of the registered voters. And I'd like to believe that there was a serious count in that demographic analysis to tell us, oh, that these are the people who were coming to vote. They did a spread, women, laborers, artisans. Oh, there was wonderful analysis done through the season. But side by side, to go back to what you raised, I don't know how we can, and that's why I'm suggesting what sociologists and political scientists are saying, can we all sit down and have a conversation, a serious conversation on national values that will bring back integrity into the system. Then we can now say, those who were registered were Nigerians and these are not. But then that's a question of integrity and leadership.
All right, I really liked it, you know, when you said that sociologists and political scientists should sit down and really think towards how to build a nation. It is very important. And of course, when Christy raised the issue of, foreigners who are registered, that tells me something, that there's a syndicate or something operating somewhere, an organized body, a network of persons who are ensuring that those foreigners are registered. These are foreigners with PVCs, Nigerian PVCs. So it's not, it didn't happen just by accident. It is by design. And what also worries Nigerians is the fact that 2019, or even in 2015, we had this record of children being registered, or the underage being registered. And this year again, we saw a little boy with less than 7 years that they just put out his pocket and bought a PVC. So I was just wondering, I mean, if...
And the police explained that the child is probably vertically challenged.
Not necessarily, but it was not at that point.
No, I said, during the election,
yes,
I said vertical.
What the policeman said, the commissioner of police said that, that someone could be stunted. That is true as well. But then when you see a child, you know a child. It's as simple as that. So that's why I want to bring you in on this issue of registering foreigners.
Well, I think that you need to first deal with the challenge of your porous borders. Your borders are porous. The ability to move from one place to the other in a way, and the issue of corruption that is everyone knows has already condemned us to some of those challenges that we are facing. And these borders are not in one part of the country. So many times there is also a way in which we focus conversation about a certain part of the country. But if you check, we have borders around the country in a way that you can't say when a Cameroonian has come in here. And if a Cameroonian Gambian is walking on the road, street of Lagos or Abuja, you can't say this person is a Gambian. So the due diligence in terms of our immigration security provisioning is challenged, and we have to deal with that. But like we said, if you have unscrupulous people within INEC, and this is known to everybody, very unscrupulous folks who are hawking solutions to politicians all over the place. And our politicians, in spite of whatever they tell you, are people who are invested in dubious advantage. They even election they will win, they want to see whether they can still rig it from the beginning. So the voter registry is the base, is the foundation of fair credible election. So, but the system itself, especially with the coming of this commission, we need to situate this very clearly. That, and I like to call him uncle. My uncle in Benin was talking about technology failing us. Technology did not fail us in this election. What failed us is transmission. The beaver itself is the reason you are seeing the figures that you are seeing. It is the fear of it also. Not just the beaver, but the fear of it has helped us to come to the... Because what does it do? Is accreditation. But before the registry, you have to know that we had a claim and what do you call it?
Claims and objections.
Where this register was pasted at the different polling units, and citizens were asked to go to the place and see whether first their names were registered correctly, inserted correctly. If not, and if there are names of people who should not be in that register who are there, 1 week period. As you know, that is not a place that we are interested in. We will not go there. We will not do the due diligence. There are also systemic things that have been introduced to clean that register. But it cannot be foolproof, as you know, because of these unscrupulous folks that I talk about. And it takes me to the point that I talk about. Many times organizations in Nigeria are protective of people who do the wrong things within their organization, rather than dealing with them. And because in Imo State, you had it was shown on national television, folks who were arrested on account of this voter registration thing. Everywhere. As we speak now, if you go back to that, Kingsley, you will not see anybody on that voter registration thing who has been, sanctioned. So when we move on and give the people who do the wrong the impression that they can do whatever they like and get away with it. And then let us also not mistake state-conducted elections, the ones in state independent elections that they conduct, where they conduct without process. Because we also have been talking about subnational elections and the impact that it has. When you organize state elections and is a free-for-all, come and line up, and then children, all kinds of people, 98%, the dominant political party in that state takes 98%. During the general elections, which is conducted by INEC, many of those children also flock the voting areas. Not necessarily, because I've always made that point that everybody you see in a polling area does not mean he's a voter. Because that is also what analysts do at times. They say, I was on television with a panel, and they say, oh, I was impressive. And I say, hey, hold it. Hold this, you're impressive. Turnout. I said, don't use it again, because in doing that, you are going to set a trigger when the actual figures come out. And I used stacking plastic chairs as an example. If we stack plastic chairs here, if you just come in here, you will think that it's, when you take a count, you'll be so shocked that it may not even be up to 100. So the big challenge for me is there are mechanisms that we need to put in place. Clear mechanisms that we need to put in place. Citizens have to understand that that claims and objection period is not for nothing that is put there. If you go there and you see name of people who have passed on, people who are not supposed to be there, it is that duty, that patriotic duty that we have to challenge those things. We don't challenge them. Okay, Oga Kingsley, when we came to this studio and we were talking about, first of all, partisan people finding their way into INEC. People with partisan backgrounds.
Being appointed, not finding their way.
Being appointed into... How many people... The political parties did not join us in that. If you remember, it became a civil society thing, as if we were against some people. The manipulation of elections does not start on your voting day. The manipulation of elections starts with the personnel, the quality, the integrity, and he talked about it. The integrity, the background, where those people are coming from, what are the antecedents, how knowledgeable are they about election issues, and who is bringing them to the commission.
Okay, Ezenwa, thank you very much for the points you have raised, but I want to ride on one of those points and go back to Mr. Tony Abolo in our Benin Network studios. You talked about some lessons in civics to say once the voters' roll for a constituency or for a polling area is published or displayed, it is the duty of citizens to follow up on the claims and objections and register that. But that isn't one of our habits. So I'm going to Mr. Tony Abolo to say, look, how then do we make that part of our habit? To say, this is not just a perfunctory task that INEC is asking you to perform. INEC is asking you to assist it, because it isn't a magician, assist it in cleaning up the register so that you have a clear voter's roll, because a voter's roll is the foundation, for instance, of the numbers that you will get in terms of outcome. That's one. How do we ramp up that lesson in civics? The other issue, again, back to the point of registration. Is there a seeming desperation during the registration period to get in as many potential registrants and voters, so that we don't care, as it were, where registration takes place? You will find some domains or some locations are converted into registration centers where people are asked, come. And in border communities, we are bordered on three sides, as it were, by neighboring countries: Benin to the west, Cameroon to our east, and then in the north you have Chad and Niger, and of course some persons can always stray in from Burkina Faso and elsewhere. To say that in the course of registration, there ought to be some minimum requirements. I mean, when we are registering, nobody appears to ask you any question. You just register. So could that be part of the filtration process that we need to bring in? whether immigration might help, particularly in the border communities or some other locations. That's one. Second point also, as I raised earlier, has to do with how we can revamp our lessons in civics to know that registration is one, and then claims and objections, opportunity for that, it's also a very critical one before you go out to vote on election day. Mr. Bolo.
Well, quite a lot of concern, meaty concerns, when it comes to looking at how we clean our political system and evolve into a more decent political culture. Let's look at this issue of the claims and objections that INEC does. The first thing I've always wondered, why should it not be come and go? You see, if you made election registration, collecting your PVC, and a throughout the year event, somebody has to sit down and do his or her work. We have too many lazy people who are governing the system. Too many lazy people. It might be a lot of work, but then in that way I can come and I can go. Then it means you don't use 1 week window to do claims and objections. 1 week window, either to register or whatever it is you want to do. 1 week window to come and look at the displayed list. I'm busy. I've got other things to do. Then we go back to where we started, which is the issue that there is no good governance to get us the bounce. Because if I know that government matters and my input matters in the system, I will want to go and see that the process is well done. But what happens? I'm not made enthusiastic. I'm not made to feel a citizen. Rather, if we may quote Professor Mamdani, there are citizens and subjects. We are more subjects in this country than citizens. So the fewer people that are citizens go down and do whatever they want. And the subject just says, well, whatever it is that they want to do. And that has been the attitude. So when are we going to convert citizens or convert the subjects into citizens? That's exactly a task that must be done. And INEC has to help us and to do more work than they are doing. Because this business of, we want to do it, we want to clean up, we want to aggregate, we want to go to the database, all that is fine grammar about systems and administration. But I'd like to think that if they want to serve Nigeria, for that kind of money we're throwing into the place, and by the way, we're talking about throwing all that money, I said to myself, why spend so much money? And at the end, we end up with elections that end us in the courts. And we are saying, can we disaggregate the system so that elections produce a candidate and not that courts produce a candidate? And it's because INEC is not serving us well, and that's why we now find ourselves that courts seem to institute or do the elections for us, and that is a bit dangerous, very, very dangerous. We've not stopped it. So going back to what I was saying, that is, INEC must do a lot of work. Then the other issue, which is quite valid, how do we bounce up civic consciousness? How do we make people responsible in the system? And to use a Nwagu statement, to avoid those dubious characters in the system that inject all sorts of things. We've known for a start, through the years, that elections are manipulated. As soon as the bell goes, there's going to be election. In fact, who knows that we just left 2023. How do we know that in the next few years, the people who are strategizing to take power, because that's the way it works in Nigeria, those who are sulking, licking their wounds, they're all getting prepared for the next round of elections. And so they are the ones who begin to set up the system and want to game the system. And I think it's time we now begin to look at those loopholes. Do we leave it at the media level? Do we ask some civil societies who should be more interested in these kind of things? Do we get the faith-based organizations to do more work? The intellectuals, the academia? So you see, it's a lot of work to be done by everybody to get an engagement. And then you need back again to the issue of integrity. The political heads, the governors, the presidents should show character and leadership and tell us that this is where I want to go. And let's not forget, and we quickly tend to forget in this country, when Eradua, when his election was over, the first thing he said, yes, I'm elected as president, but I'm not comfortable with the method by which I won this election. For that reason, there was a Justice Wise Commission, and there was a long-standing study to do what we wanted next done, and that they created so many commissions. But like in typical Nigerian fashions, after the Justice Wise Commission, all what happened, all the report came, they just pigeonholed every one of them. Nobody went back to them. Because if we had gone back to Eredua's time and decided that those reports were valid and we needed to use them to improve on the system, so we will be talking about what all these complaints were making in 2023. No way. But we do things and forget. And we will complain now and we don't do anything about it. So that's why it's going to be important for civic engagement, and let us have civic consciousness in such a way that every group, whether you are NMA, NBA, whatever group you belong to, media, civil societies, we should all as Nigerians begin to say, look, enough is enough. We are tired of complaining. It's time for us to engage the system. It's because we're backing out and we are not moving forward to say, this is what I should do as a patriotic Nigerian, and perhaps cross the threshold of saying, even if those in leadership do not encourage me, I'd like to be that if I did this, I did it for my country. Someday we'll win. But what happens is when people even raise themselves up, people will tell you, not only you did, what thing you want to do, which one concern you? When we begin to make such ridiculous comments, people tend to pull back and then don't engage the system. So we need to fight the system, because there's not going to be victory without a fight. I don't think so. But Nigerians believe that they can go to heaven without dying. I don't know how they're going to do it, but we want to cross over and think that when we just keep wishing, it will happen. It's not going to happen. Never. We must engage the system robustly, anxiously, angrily, if need be.
All right, Tony Abolo, thank you indeed. You have really raised very pertinent points there, trying to provide answers to questions posed by my colleague. As a matter of fact, it's like a recalling the slogan of the 1980s, say Nigeria, a new consciousness, that we need a new consciousness. And of course, that is the more reason why we keep discussing such topical issues on Good Morning Nigeria. We are going to other aspects, though, but very shortly. Before that, let's bring in a guest who has just joined us in Abuja studios here, and he's the Halilu Pai, former resident electoral commissioner, INEC. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers.
All right. We're indeed happy that you were able to make it this morning and be with us on the program.
It was due to serious hold-ups around.
All right. Okay. I think we also would like you to, give us your opening salvo. We are looking at election financing, and also juxtaposing it with the fact that in this particular election, that we seem to have much less Nigerians, who participated in the voting compared to previous elections. Yet, the nation expended a humongous amount of money on INEC to ensure that something new is done. And of course, we went technological. At the end of the day, we don't seem to have, made very good use of that technology with respect to what we have at the moment. Now, what's your own view of what has played out?
Good morning again, viewers. My take is really considering the funds that is being expended vis-a-vis the number of people that turn out, during election. One can say is like a waste, because if you know, and it's the public domain, the amount of money that INEC spends in personnel, materials, services, and comparing it with the number that actually do the voting. For example, this election, we've been told that the total number of people that have collected the permanent voters card is about 87.2 million or thereabout. But from the results, one can see the total number that have voted not more than 20-something million. So almost 50 million that have been provided for have not taken the opportunity to exercise their franchise. And the reason for that is not far-fetched, really. Being an immediate resident electoral commissioner, unfortunately my colleague here is around from the civil society, we know that the public or voter education and enlightenment usually is left in the hands of the election management body largely, or the civil society organization and some of the NGOs. But the fact remains that the political parties, it is their duty to actually educate and enlighten the people, because the voting is for them. They are really not participating as it should be. That is one. Number two, you will find that the security situation may have also contributed, to what one may call the apathy, especially in the security challenged areas. Another point is the fact that the level of education and understanding of the populace, people do not really know that to vote is a right which they must or they should exercise. In fact, in some countries, if you don't vote, there is penalty for it. So I believe that the aspect of legislation of making it more or less compulsory is missing in this country. So I think some of these challenges are those that are attributing to what I may call voter apathy. In short, you will find that what is being spent, does not in any way, match the output. And what is the output? The number of people that have come out to
now
vote.
would you subscribe to making voting compulsory in Nigeria? From your experience as an ex-rec, is it a possibility?
In fact, for me, I will actually advocate for making a legislation that voting becomes compulsory, except, of course, if one is under certain condition of health that he may not be able. Look at, the situation in this country. Most of the time, on the days of the election, which is usually Saturday, from morning to at most, say, maybe 6 o'clock, you find people, able-bodied men, either playing football or doing their own business. And I think that one too is as a result of their non-consciousness that what they are going to do in voting is more than if it is business. Because you need to have a stable society before your business flourish well. If not, most of them, the young men, are just playing football, and because they don't see the value of going out to vote. Another point is that I'm sorry to use this word, the leaders too, by the time they're able to get the mantle of leadership through the voting, no matter how little. You can now see the whole president is getting this in at 8,700,000 and something in a country of over 200 million with 87 point something million.
The people are saying it's because of bad governance, the people are not interested, because of
point. Sometimes people say, okay, even if I go, what is my gain? And this issue of vote buying, since now things have been made more difficult, people would normally want to, when they go to have something, and now things are INEC has really made things more difficult for politicians, so they make it uninteresting for people to go and vote due to what the leaders have been doing.
All right. Thank you very much, Halilu Pai, for your initial comments. We do appreciate those views. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on NTA's network service. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation. All right, you're welcome back, and we're still live on NTA's network service, broadcasting from our Abuja headquarters studios. Our three guests are still with us. In Benin, Tony Abolo, here in Abuja studios, Halilu Pai, a former resident electoral commissioner, and Ezenwa Nwagu, who is chair of Partners for Electoral Reforms. In looking at, my question is going to Ezenwa, in looking at the poor aggregates of voters who turn out on election day versus those who collect their PVCs. I know you made a fundamental point earlier that voting is optional in our country. Pai says that we should have some legislation that makes voting compulsory. How you're going to enforce that, of course, just might be a challenge. But let's take some steps back and ask ourselves, because at the end of the day, in computing the cost, we're looking at, for instance, what is the proposed elections spend per voter? And if you now have 60 million voters plus not turning up, it means that that money is wasted. And part of the spend will include ballot papers. We have seen over cycles of election the improvements that INEC had brought. If you remember, in 2007, there were concerns, and there was a litigation that got up to the Supreme Court about the serial numbers on ballot papers. Now we have a situation where ballot papers are customized
to the polling
unit. So if you have 500 registered voters in a particular polling unit and only 5 turn up, it means 495 ballot papers are wasted. So INEC introduced these customized ballot papers as part of the ways of being several steps ahead of election riggers. But we are seeing the reverse now in terms of cost. I mean, if INEC got 305 billion this year for this year's election, 2019 they got 189 billion. How do you account for that? That 60 million voters failed to turn up. So how do we, Ezenwa, I know you're quite familiar with this, how do we then deal with this? Is there a way to print ballot papers that may account for the persons who are likely to turn up? I know it's going to be difficult. Okay, second point would then be, can we also begin to make allowance for advanced voting? A good number of persons on election day duty, obviously going to have cast their votes, unless, of course, they were working in the same polling units. Ezenwa.
Well, I think first is that you must plan for everyone. You cannot say because people will not turn up. There is no way you will know whether they will turn up except on the election day. So if you don't plan for them, that becomes a crisis. We came out, they didn't prepare for us. That's a worst scenario. That I came to vote and there is no ballot paper. So the thinking is that you must prepare for every prospective voter. And we also had a challenge where computation of results used to be on number of PVCs collected.
No, registered voters.
Registered voters.
Now it's PVC.
Now it's the PVC collected. And then accreditation as well. So these are shifts. The thinking around what to do with the challenge is something that electoral reform conversations would embrace. But it also must include the democratic component that is about participation, and that no one person should be left out of participating. And the investment that we have done is expensive, but it is also carefully done in a way that leads us to the improvements that we seek. Why did we get to the point where we are doing permanent voters card? Why is it not possible for me as a citizen to walk up to the place? It is our trust issues. That's why we came there. In 2007, 2003, we had shoddy preparation for elections. Everybody knows that. We had a register that everyone, in the ones you talked about, Mike Tyson and the rest of them, in the register. That was where we were coming from. We were coming from a place where you are going to vote. All this one that we are shouting, now you're still on your way to vote. The result of where you are voting will be announced. We are at a point of outright rigging. We were at a point where nothing was done about the negative behavior of political parties. That's where we came from. To 2007, where President Umaru Yar'Adua, shifted that needle and said, look, the process that brought me is fraudulent. And that was flawed. Yeah. And that if it is flawed, there's something. So we went into ways and the rest of them. And then we started the interventions that has led us to where we are. Each of that is expensive. It has something to do with what Uncle Ebolo was talking about in Benin. If your integrity, in the places, Germany is one of the most advanced technological countries in the world. It runs away from electronic voting because of the challenges that it has. So we are moving there because we want to remove considerable human elements in our process, and we are not doing badly. Kenya,
but the movement is costly. That's what we're talking
yes,
about.
it's costly, but it is also a safety valve for the bigger challenge of the crisis that you have if your election is not imbued with the necessary integrity. We are shouting today. Before now, Kenya did this electronic transmission. It failed the first time. The next time they did it well. So what did we do? We attacked the smart card reader. We came on the smart card reader and got the smart card reader, discredited it in a way that pushed us to the beavers that we are now. And there is that resistance to technology. If you have not noticed that, there is ordinarily politicians are resistant to technology because they know what it means in terms of electoral integrity. So, but whether we have to invest in doing that is another matter. But it will pale into insignificance if governance improves, if majority of the citizens begin to see value for money. You understand? And it has nothing to do with the challenge is that whether at the local government level, whether the majority of Nigerians do not yet connect. I'm coming. And he made the point about citizens and subjects. Democracy does not contemplate subjects. There is no place for subjects in a democracy. If you are a subject, it's by choice. Because the law, the rights, the duties of citizens are there. If you decide, this is the only country where people say, Uncle Kingsley, you are not carrying me along. You are not carrying you along. There is a budget.
There's cash now. So
no, there is a budget. Yes. This budget is done by government. And when government does a budget, it is your money, your own money.
Public money.
Yes, your money anticipated. If we get this amount of money from you, we will use it to do so and so for you. And it is put in a document. As a citizen, it is your responsibility to look for that document. The person who holds it does not want you to see what is in the document. So you have to take the extra step to say, you planned for me in 2018. You said you will build XY number of roads. I have not seen this. In 2019, these things are recycled because educated people in our country, we live in Amak here. Many of us live in different local governments. Those local governments have budgets. We pay taxes. They stop us on the road. We pay VAT. All kinds of things are collected from us. But the condition that is necessary for us to enjoy the benefit from the other side, we are aloof. We are insensitive to it, and we blame everybody for the challenges that we have. So if for instance, INEC says there is a claim and objections period, no matter what reservations you have with that process, it is a window to correct something.
Some anomalies.
If you don't take it,
I was just wondering, Killian, I know you are coming in. This idea is just occurring to me now, particularly in cleaning up a voters register of persons who are deceased. Look, when there's registration of births and deaths, there's registration of birth and registration of death.
Uncle Kingsley,
so I'm just wondering,
who has died? Who do you know? The statistics.
I know that in some communities, those things don't take place. But I'm just wondering, because you have so many databases, is it possible?
You know that politicians do advert for somebody who is alive that is dead? Are you aware? Well, politicians produce obituary paper.
Gentlemen, you know, while listening to President Wanwagu, I just kept wondering, because he went historical, and it's as if we're doing a repeat of what we've done before. The Kadura was discarded for obvious reasons. When we deal with technology is not created by God. It's a human-made product that can fail you, at the nick of time. The point is that even the card reader, I didn't see any problem with card reader in the first instance. Now we're talking about having a good electoral expenditure, and what we see is that
we spent 73 billion in 2010-2011 buying computers and going round wards. Those computers, 73 billion is on there. If you want to even look at 2023 election, all you need to do is to go and take INEC report for 2011. You'll be shocked.
So we keep doing the same thing, and I want to bring you in. Sorry, Tony Abolo, we'll come to you before we end. But Halilu just joined us, and he was a former resident electoral,
several times.
Commissioner, or several times. So yeah, 2 times. So you are in the know of what I'm going to ask you now, because it has to do with integrity of INEC personnel. Because whatever methodology or any ideology put in place, either technological or otherwise, it cannot function efficiently or optimally without having personnel of the INEC, people who have respect for themselves and the integrity, and who believe that the nation is bigger than whatever you are going to make as an individual. Because most elections are marred by electoral personnel. There are no two ways about that. Even if it's casual staff or ad hoc staff or regular staff of the establishment. So Tony Abolo did make a point when he talked about civic consciousness of Nigerians and the much work INEC is expected to do to educate Nigerians. They have a big department of voter education and what have you. But I'm not sure it's done enough to now inculcate in Nigerians the essence of voting, the value, and all of that. And of course, the integrity of the election, you are wanting me to go and stand under the sun, queue up, and vote. And after which, perhaps you tell me that you have a faulty line or something, and now you mess up my 8, 7, 10 hours. So I spent 12 hours, trying to vote in this past election.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Really, as far as the participation or contribution of INEC staff in either making an election successful or otherwise, is a product of 2 issues. One is the trading aspect. You see, severally, some of these ad hoc personnel that are being recruited, to operate these technological devices, like when we started with a smart card reader, and now we are using beavers. They really need sufficient training. You may have observed in some places anyway that even how to operate the beavers was a problem. Therefore, there is the need for adequate training of both the permanent and ad hoc staff. And this is very important. We need to increase the number of days that ad hoc staff are being trained shortly before they are being sent out there for the election. Usually is between 3 days, but we found that 3 days is not enough. And in fact, even during the training, you can hardly see enough of these devices going around during training. Some of the devices come almost late. You know, even during the training, these things are not available. That's one. Number two is the network issues. Though I understand that beavers do not really need any network, but you can now see that the server, you know, that has to use network has made the election, which started very well, to have some issues because the test of the technology was not taken holistically. You know, when this started, it was for off-season elections. You know, maybe like states that are off-season, or maybe some by-election or some rerun elections. But when it came now to general election, we have seen that there is this challenge. And that's why the issue of training, I continue to repeat, is very, very important.
Okay, thank you very much, Hallelu Pai. We're getting pressed for time. Just one point I would like to introduce and probably get a brief response from Mr. Tony Abolo in our Benin Network Center. Under our constitution and under the laws, the beneficiaries of votes are political parties and candidates. And when we're looking at the turnout now, 25 million voters who turned out for the presidential election, the question is bound to arise. Why were political parties bragging about the numbers of their registered voters? If you were to aggregate the numbers of registered voters, they probably would trump the figure that we're having here at 25 million. Why is it that political parties, it's an issue that has engaged us here on Good Morning Nigeria, do not appear to manage themselves or manage their members in an organic manner? If you encourage your members, say, look, it's voting time, it's voting day, go out there and vote. I'm sure these numbers, of course, would have been much higher than we are seeing today. And unfortunately, we're not even hearing political parties lamenting the fact that their members didn't turn out for the elections. What does that tell us? Mr. Abolo, very quickly.
Well, frankly, just like Hallelu did talk about political parties, we know the history of what someone who occupies the office of organizing secretary means in the older days of Nigerian political history. And today, the organizing secretaries, maybe they're just like glorified office people. That's all. An organizing secretary has a major function to drum up support, to go about like the Americans would say, getting out the vote. But they don't do that. And it's all mixed with the fact of money bags. Everybody's sitting back. You don't invest inside your political party. You're waiting for the money back, who may have stolen sufficiently well to distribute the largest and hold the reins of power inside the political party. That is also a fact you must address. So if all joiners, to use the old Babangida's language, if all joiners get in and also pay their bills, and everybody owns the political party, then I'm sure we can drum up their support so that we don't have all these, what really, by media language, we'll talk about as propaganda, to tell you they're going to get so many millions. They were going to get 14 million. They're going to get out 13 million. But they never did their work of campaigning and getting their people interested. So,
Abolo, we thank you indeed for your submissions this morning. Tony Abolo, a veteran broadcaster, sociologist, and media consultant. reached us from our Benin studio. Ezewan Wago, Chairman Partners for Electoral Reforms. It's always a pleasure having you here. Halilu Pai, former Resident Electoral Commissioner, INEC. We thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right. And of course, it's here that we conclude this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, except perhaps we have some sports tidbits before we call it today.
Let's go over now to the foreign scene for some stories.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says operations to defend the embattled eastern city of Bakhmut will go on and backed by senior generals. Western analysts suggested at the weekend that Ukraine was probably withdrawing some of its troops as Russian forces close in on the city. Moscow has been trying to take Bakhmut for months as both sides suffer heavy losses in a grinding war of attrition. Local official says there has been street fighting in recent days, but deputy mayor said at the weekend that Russia had not yet gained control of the city. Now, elsewhere, the United Nations said the human rights situation in Eritrea remains dire and shows no sign of improvement, citing cases of torture and enforced disappearances committed with total impunity. Eritrea, one of the world's most closed and authoritarian countries, has been ruled with an iron fist since its independence from Ethiopia in 1993 by President Asias Afewerki. The UN also continues to receive credible reports of torture, inhumane detention conditions and enforced disappearances.
That's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We appreciate your being with us. Tomorrow is another day, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kyrian. Do have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.